So welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. This is Hugh Culver, and this is a webinar called Design My Best Year Ever, How to Overcome Challenges, Improve Systems, and Build Your Habit Muscle. Man, you gotta love a title like that. These are webinars that I offer throughout the year. I try to do them about once every month, and they're completely free. And it's my way of sharing some content, learning more about what people want and what they're interested in. And also just, it's a chance for me to also test some content, to be quite frank with you, because what I'm always trying to do is get better, and which is kind of an underlying theme of what today is all about. And my way of doing that is just to try and experiment. So today is a follow-through from a really successful webinar I did with my friend Byron Mickey back in December, which was all about how to wrap up 2014. We had a huge response to that webinar. So this one is about moving forward, and it's interactive. I'm going to be asking you questions as we go through. I know I'm covering a lot in it, so I'll give you a chance at the end to request a hard copy of this webinar if you want a hard copy of the slides. I don't normally do that, but I think you might really like the methodologies that I'm sharing with you. And of course it's being recorded, so anybody that can't attend, so we have about 200 people that have registered for today, and so anybody that can't attend, of course, will be getting a recording for it. Okay, so let's jump right in. Let's talk about why I wanted to do this in January. Well, as all of you know, we have a problem in January, and it's called resolutions. And whether you actually sat down and made resolutions, or whether you are more of a goal maker, or whether you kind of blew the whole process off, the reality is that we are, generally speaking, not very good at keeping these kind of resolutions. And I think, you know, in one way it's great that we're dreamers, and it's one way it's great that we think this is going to be the year that we're going to, you know, make more money, save more money, go on more vacations, lose weight, take better care of ourselves, whatever. At the same time, reality hits, and I want to talk a little bit about the challenge, because when you look at, you know, some of the various surveys that are out there, some of them say that we, as much as 80% of our resolutions fail. Well, there's a real cost to that. Of course, there's the cost of not being able to achieve what we set out to achieve, but the other real cost is what goes on behind the scenes, and this is what I am talking about. You see, I think there's a certain process that happens when we set our aspirations and don't reach them. So whether at the top of the screen we're talking about goals or dreams or wishes or resolutions or whatever you want to call them, we eventually are going to have some kind of early success. I mean, you know, even if you just say to yourself, look, I want to drink less cola, or I want to turn work off in the afternoon, or I want to watch less TV or Netflix or YouTube, whatever. Of course, you're going to have some success initially. Well, we usually do that. You know, we get all ambitious, and we smoke a little less, drink a little less, eat a little less, go to bed earlier. And then what happens is we tell people about it. And there's actually a really interesting TED Talk, one of my favorite ones, by a fellow named Derek Sivers. And Derek's an interesting character because he's the founder of something called CD Book Baby, which he built up really quickly to be quite a success story. And it actually physically mails out CDs. This is, you know, early days before iTunes. And then he sold the company and gave away all of his money. And in this one TED Talk, he talks about the danger of announcing your successes, because he says that psychologically what starts to happen is we actually start to believe that we deserve something as a result of that. And there's actually there's a psychological phenomenon that happens. It's called actually moral licensing. And what Derek was talking about was this idea of moral licensing. It's like I go to the gym and now I feel like I deserve ice cream. And so after that initial success and we announce our success, then we reward ourselves. So we say, wow, way to go. And then what eventually happens, because life takes hold, is we become maybe a little inconsistent, we become a little distracted, maybe we have a new goal which competes with the old goal, and then maybe we become a little discouraged, which leads to less success, because it's pretty hard to be successful if you've got all that going on in the background. This is what Martin Seligman would call learned helplessness, this idea that naturally optimistic human beings can learn how to be helpless by simply living in the kind of inconsistent, distracted new goal. And what happens, he says, when we get into that state is we start to see problems as being personal. In other words, it's my fault. I beat myself up. We see them as being pervasive. The problem is everywhere. And we see them as being permanent. The problem will not go away. And then, of course, what happens then is rather than focusing on success, we focus on failure. Then we become convinced of failure, like before, like when it happened to me before. And then what ends up happening is we get what's known as a cognitive bias. Man, I'm throwing a lot of terms at you here, but so in addition to moral licensing, which basically says I deserve, because of what I've earned, I deserve to do things differently because of the success I've had, we also can get cognitive bias, or call it self-fulfilling prophecy, or call it, when I'm doing my keynotes, I call it my window on the world. But a cognitive bias is a particular way of looking at something and because of what I've experienced. So what happens with cognitive bias is we actually we estimate how likely something is going to be based on how easy it was for us to see it in the past. In other words, if I've seen myself fail, I believe now it's much more likely I will fail in the future. And so this cognitive bias influences a lot of things in our life. So for example, people overestimate the risk of flying on airplanes, even though statistically the risk of you having an accident on an airplane is 1 in 14 million. Because we hear about it in the newspapers periodically, unfortunately more often than recently we've been hearing about quite a bit, but because we hear about it in the newspaper, we actually overestimate the failure rate that we might experience. And the reality is you're much more likely to get some incredibly rare disease than you are to actually die on an airplane. Well, the same thing happens with our own personal performance. When we fail, we overestimate the risk of us failing again. And what eventually happens then, unfortunately, is we move into a place where we now don't believe our own dreams. We don't believe our own goals. And again, this is where we can move into learned helplessness. And so today, what I'm going to talk about is a certain methodology whereby we can not only set better goals, but we can actually manage the failures that inevitably will come along, which they will. I mean, if you're on this call and you've actually got any kind of real aspirations for this year that you feel are quite edgy, and I'm going to share with you 3 of them that I've got for myself this year. But if you've got some that are edgy, you absolutely are going to experience some failure. But that does not mean you will not be able to achieve your goals. It just means you need to have a strategy to overcome those failures, because that's what life is all about. So here's what I'm going to cover today. I'm going to cover 4 things. First of all, we're going to talk about goals, but we're not going to talk about SMART goals and all those traditional strategies that you should be really familiar with. We're going to talk about something a little bit different than that I think you're going to find is really pretty cool and kind of almost like an Uber way of thinking about goals, if you will. We're going to talk about challenges and how to manage those challenges, and I'm actually going to share with you how I break my challenges down into 3 types of challenges. Then we're going to talk about tracking and what that is and how it works. And then finally, we're going to talk about tiny wins. And we're going to do all this, and we're going to wrap it up for you in the next 50 minutes. And I'll ask you a few questions as we go through. So first of all, one of the things that I want you to be aware of about these webinars is that, whereas today I'm talking about goal setting and success and mindset, in the past, especially in 2014, I was also at the same time doing webinars that were more for what's often known as the speaker community or the expert community. So this is for consultants and authors and speakers and seminar leaders. And this year, I'm going to actually blend those together. So in other words, you're going to be getting invitations for webinars like this one, which is all about personal performance, but you're also occasionally going to get invitations for webinars that are much more geared around communication and around sharing your message and telling stories. So I hope that you can just simply self-select and that you won't find this distracting. In other words, these invitations. So in other words, pick the ones that are of interest to you, and you can just let the other ones slide by. So here's some of the goals that I've got for this year, and they're pretty ambitious goals. So first of all, I'm teaming up with a friend of mine, Jane Atkinson, and in a little over a month, we're going to be launching the Business of Speaking School, or what I call BOSS. And that's a pretty ambitious goal because I'm in a new partnership with Jane, which I'm excited about. We're going to be doing some really close collaboration to make sure this is a huge success, and we've got some really ambitious goals. And then in August, we're going to be doing a conference together called the Speaker Conference in Vancouver, which is going to be a beautiful location for people to come to in August, and that's going to be a really high-powered conference for people that want to learn how to package and share their message on stage or in the written form. And then I'm going to be relaunching my Time Freedom Formula course, which had huge success in 2014, which is an online learning program for people that want to be a little less overwhelmed and learn real disciplines around how to use their time. So these are huge goals. And in addition, I'm an active speaker. My kids are got really busy lives. My wife has her own business and practice, and so I'm sharing this with you because I want you to know that I am highly aware of what I'm talking about today is completely relevant for myself as well, because of the ambitions that I've got, and also the fact that I know that I'm going to have some setbacks. So let's talk about goals and what is the problem with goals. Well, here's some of the problems that are going to come up. First of all, we have too many. I mean, I can share with you right now that those 3 goals I just shared with you, I started out with a lot more than that when I was in my planning phase in 2014. So I've got it down to 3 major business goals. But before that, I had probably 12. So that's one problem, is too many goals. Second is bad design. So having goals that are vague, or goals that are either too ambitious or are not ambitious enough, or don't have specific measurables. The third challenge with goals is goals that conflict. In other words, they conflict with your other ambitions. They conflict with the amount of time that you've actually got. So, for example, it's great that you have goals for health and for your maybe managing your weight and changing your diet. But the reality is that if you've got a super busy job and you've got working long hours during the day, you're going to have to find some way to compromise, or maybe you travel a lot. We may have lost our visual, but I'm just going to keep on going while we get that fixed up, so don't worry about that. So that's a type of conflicting goal. Also, goals that are hidden. So what I mean by that is, you write them up and then you kind of put them away somewhere, or tuck them into your journal, or they're on some file on your computer. And I've discovered a really simple secret, and that is that the goals have got to be visible. I got to be looking at them actually every day. And in fact, I read a research study last year that I thought was really interesting, where salespeople that actually look at their sales goals every day, on average, get 30% more success in terms of achieving their sales goals, just simply because they look at them every day. And then the fifth and the last challenge is that there's no motivation. So in other words, you may have great goals, but they don't actually inspire you. And so what happens is you're not actually motivated to actually do something with them. Okay, so here's what I'd like you to do, is I'd like to give you a little exercise. And the exercise is this. What I'd like you to do is I would like you to think about goals that flopped for you in 2014. Now, I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just trying to do a little current reality check-in. So there's 3 types of goals I want you to think about: work goals, relationship goals, and then personal goals, or person goals. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to go up to the Ask a Question box, and I'd like you to type in, what kind of goals flopped for you in 2014. I'm not going to read them out with your name, by the way. I'll just read out some of the examples of goals. But if you can think of either a work goal, a relationship goal, or a personal goal that flopped 2014, what is it? And just kind of like, what kind of goal was it? Like, what is it that you can share with me right now? And again, I won't read your name with it, but what kind of goals flopped in 2014? So I'm reading, like, didn't meet my income goal is one. Thanks for that. Writing a professional certification exam, didn't make 6 figures. Well, that's great. That was a good goal. Losing weight, stretch sales target. Didn't do as well learning a new language as I wanted. Rid my home of clutter, which, by the way, that is a really important goal. Personal goal to lose weight and get in better shape. Getting in better health. These are great. Thanks for keep going. Let's see, work, getting on top of things like email and tasks. Another one was doubling my income, and my goals for how much income I wanted to earn. Another one was work, getting 2 new accounts per month being the goal. Stop drinking Diet Coke. I could give you some good incentive on that. Work goal, like taking coffee breaks and lunch breaks consistently. I didn't say no when asked for personal time commitments, like volunteering. So you over-volunteered, over-committed. Time for vacation. So here's the deal. I bet I could go through everybody on this call, and you, like me, would have something to add to this list. And this is not a bad thing. This is the human condition. The question is not whether or not we're going to have setbacks. The question is, how do we manage them? That, to me, is the most important part of moving towards mastery in this whole human experience that we're having, is not that we have setbacks, but how do we manage the setbacks when they happen. Okay, now again, we're getting the visual back up for you in just a few minutes here. We're just working on it, so you might see it pop up in just a minute, but I'm just going to keep on talking. So what I want to share with you is kind of a different way to think about goals, and you might find this kind of radical, but I think that it's probably at the same time somewhat refreshing, because what it does is it sort of sets a foundation for your success. And let me explain to you what I mean. I could drone on and on this call about different strategies for making goals, but the reality is, if you've already told me in the last few minutes that you failed on some of your goals last year, then I don't really think more goal-setting techniques is actually the first thing that you should be looking at. You see, I believe that success begets success, that famous line. Success begets success. In other words, the more success I have, the more success I will attract and I will enjoy. Okay, I think we can all agree on that. So how do I create more success? Well, I think we need to start looking at our foundation, and I call these anchor words, or anchor 3 words. And I got this idea initially from a character named Chris Brogan many years ago, and I've been experimenting with it, and now my whole family has done this. And, including my oldest daughter, who's in second year university, who, had really, quite frankly, a pretty tough time of last semester. She really bit off a lot. She took a really heavy load of courses. She's on a scholarship, which she's trying to maintain, and she's very academic, and she has totally adopted this 3-word idea. Here's what I mean by the 3-word idea. The idea is you look for some core intention. I call them anchors, but core intention for the year. So regardless of what goals I set, regardless of what I achieve or setbacks I experience, what is kind of like the uber intention for the year, or the anchor for the year? So, for example, and these are kind of gross examples, but I think you'll see the point. Like SAS and the super service in Britain, theirs is "Who Dares Wins," and it's on their logo. And in other words, despite whatever goals they've got, that's their uber success goal. "Who Dares Wins" is their motto. The Green Berets is to liberate the oppressed. Google used to be, when they first started, do no harm. Like, I love that. Despite whatever they create, whatever they go out in huge, ambitious, either acquisitions or new products, it was do no harm. And I think that's, incredibly motivating when you start having to make huge amounts of decisions. Nordstrom is outstanding service every day, one customer at a time. Now, you can call these, mission statements or whatever, but what I'm looking for is words or language, and I'm going to instruct you on how to do it in 3, but words or language that actually override all of my goals and help me to make better decisions. Steve Jobs, you'll remember his line, put a dent in the universe. Oprah is to be a teacher and to be known for inspiring my students to be more than they thought they could be. Denise Morrison, the CEO of Campbell Soup, to serve as a leader, live a balanced life, and apply ethical principles to make a significant difference. Richard Branson, to have fun in my journey through life and learn from my mistakes. So here's what I'm going to challenge you to do, and that is to come up with 3 words that would represent success for you in 2015. Now, here are my 3 words: abundance, game, and juicy. Now, let me explain to you how this works. Okay, before you sign off and think, okay, I knew it. This is really goofy. Let me explain, because this took me a long time to come up with these words. Because you got to remember, I'm a guy that went through MBA school. I'm a guy that used to be a business consultant. So to be using words like abundance, game, and juicy is pretty edgy for me. But I'm also super excited by what they mean. So abundance to me means to not worry about whether or not there's going to be enough time, worry on whether or not there's going to be enough money or enough business or opportunities, but to look at every day as being this open book, which I can really choose what I want to create today. There's abundance everywhere. So a simple example is, when I get an inquiry for a speaking engagement, that's a very exciting moment for me, because I'm thinking I'm going to get to work with a whole new group of people. I always get excited with that. It's a new project, and the reality is that those come in. I get about 2 or 3 a week, which is a really nice luxury. I don't always win those contracts, of course, but I get 2 or 3 coming to me a week. And what I have to remind myself is that whenever I'm feeling down and feeling like I'm not creating enough success, is how easily those came in. In other words, they were always out there. Those things were always there. It's the same thing with finding time for my wife. I can feel like, wow, we're really stretched thin. We're running the kids around, and we're dealing with all sorts of other things, or our own personal interests. And then all I've got to do is just, ask and say, hey, let's go out tomorrow night, and suddenly we've got this great experience, because it was always there waiting. I just need to remember that it's available. Game is all about treating life like a bit of a game, not in terms of being frivolous or treating it as trivial, or that it's not important, but treating it without being overly serious. So in particular when it comes to business, is thinking of all of these tough decisions I have to make. It's just a game, and it's just and that, at the end of the day, no one's going to get hurt, and no one's going to die, and I'm not going to lose my shirt, nor anyone else. And so in this game, the question is, how bold can I be? And then juicy is just to look at ways to have fun. Like, just look at ways to be a little bit more goofy. So those are my 3 words. And before we start talking about how do you manage your challenges, I'm going to encourage you to write down what 3 words would sort of represent, the kind of world and the kind of life that you'd like to experience this year. So just for fun, why don't you go up and type in the Ask a Question box, why don't you go up and type in, what is a word that comes to mind that you would like to live by this year? Like, just one of the words. Like, what would you like to have as a model for yourself this year? And it doesn't have to be perfect at this stage, but something that would inspire you and maybe clear your head and help you to make better decisions. So I've got Carol wrote in blessed, not stressed. Russ, of course, being the copywriter, already wrote in 3 words: strength, abundance, and boldness. Sharon went in balance. Marie says pride and caring. That's beautiful. Adele said giving. Marilyn said focused. Keith says habits, break, change. Marion says you inspired me. Luscious. Oh, yeah, okay, I might steal that one. Ken said formidable. Oh, man, that's a nice one. Sean said provide, achieve, love. Andrew said creative. VG says discipline. Hey, VG, nice to see you on. Michelle said value. Wow, this is Terry said abundance, growing, and giving. Brian, hey Brian, nice to see you on. So Brian said purpose, passion, and play. Dana said patient and scream free. She says in brackets, as a mom. Justin said increase intentional care. Keith says communication sincere, deep. Theo says persevere. Hey, this is really great. Lowry goes joy, freedom, and love. Fantastic. So here's the idea. Let's get these 3 words together. I want you to send them off to me, so you can go ahead and you can either tweet me at Hugh Culver, or you can send them by email to hugh@hughculver.com. And I'm going to keep a record of these. And if you want some inspiration, just go ahead and email me for some ideas, because I've been working on this for a couple of months and I just love it. Pernell just came in. She said, let's see, focused, driven, and kind. So let's talk about this. Now I've got these 3 words. This is kind of like my, in my mind I think of them as over my goals. My wife likes to think of them as under the goals, sort of like grounding you. But regardless of what sort of metaphor you use, I think this is kind of like your uber objective for the year. It's kind of like this. If we were having this conversation 11 months from now and I asked you, and you were telling me you've just experienced the best year of your life. Now, I know you might be thinking, man, that's so far-fetched. I'm in my 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever. Like, that just doesn't happen anymore. But let's just assume we're having a conversation 11 months from now, and you're telling me you had the best year in your life. Well, my question to you automatically would be, what did you do differently? And how did those words help to guide you to have the best year of your life? Because I believe, as a guy that believes in abundance, that you could have the best year in your life. And I'm not talking about, suddenly you're resting on millions of dollars and never have to work again, because I'm not sure that's really your goal. What I'm talking about is satisfied, like you feel satisfied, that you lived fully, and that you experienced lots of love in your life, and you also experienced a lot of abundance, like you experienced a lot of things that are really meaningful to you. So I believe that starts by putting a definition on it. Okay, let's go on and let's see, what do I do about challenges? Well, here's something I do around challenges is, first of all, I ask myself, what type of a challenge is it? So one time, system, or habits. So now I'm going to start creeping into my sort of business systems thinking here. So let me give you an example of a one-time challenge. So as I mentioned earlier before we signed on, I was just in Florida, where Terry, who's on the line with us, Terry Brock, is right now, and he's in Orlando. I flew down to Miami and then went to Coral Gables, just south of Miami. And on the way home, I get this little text message from my phone company saying, you have used whatever, 20 megs of data. And I've been very careful not to use my cell phone because I had not signed on for some kind of a discounted plan. And there I am on my way home, and they've locked my phone. Certainly my data roaming is locked because I've hit like 20 megs, and it's $100. And I'm thinking, rats, like what? It's not that the $100 was a huge amount. I mean, after all, look what I have to spend to fly, as far as Miami from Western Canada. But it's the fact that I screwed up, right? Like I didn't make the one little step to get that prepaid account and whatever, save myself money. And so for a moment there, I'm in the Houston airport and I'm kicking myself and I'm thinking, rats, like I can't believe it, $100. I could have bought something for my kids for that $100. Like, what a waste of money. That's a one-time challenge. It's not going to happen every day. It's not may never even happen again. Maybe I've learned some great lesson, but the point is it's not going to change me. It's a one-time challenge. So what I need to do with one-time challenges is I need to, first of all, designate them as one-time challenges. So I'll show you in a minute how to manage them. The second is a system challenge. System challenge is something that I see reoccurring, creating a problem for me in terms of our internal processes, in terms of managing clients, in terms of how we clean our house, and in terms of how I plan for a trip. And I'll show you a methodology around that. And the last one of the most exciting ones for me, is a habit challenge. It's something that I personally do that is ineffective. Okay, so let's jump into the three of them. First of all, a one-time challenge. This is the process I go through. The first step in the process is I got to do a current reality check-in. And what I mean by that is I got to go, okay, all right, I blew it on the phone. Okay, got it. Now I know that's what's going on. The next step, though, is I got to process it, because you see, and we talked about this in the December webinar, it's such a really cool topic, is that we're humans, right? So it's not like we can just go and forget about it. It's like if someone disappoints you, or someone sends you an email and it sounds kind of angry, it's kind of hard to just forget about it, because you have actually had an emotional experience, and that emotional experience is hard to just discard. So I got to process this quickly, because after all, I've decided it's a one-time challenge. This is not a big reoccurring issue. So I've got to get through it quickly. So I got to say to myself, okay, look, you blew it, you wasted $100. Now it's done. Like, get over with it. So get on with it, right? It could have been worse. And maybe you've learned a lesson from it, but move on from it. When I get an email that looks angry, just look at it, say, yeah, it looks angry, but that person might have actually meant something completely differently. So let's move on and let's assume the best. The next step is I need to move into one type of forgiveness, and I'm going to suggest there's two types, and I need to pick one. One is forgiveness with resentment. Forgiveness with resentment is it's kind of like a whatever. It's sort of like I'm trying to ignore it, but I don't really ignore it. I still hold a grudge. I haven't told the person, but I really feel like they disappointed me. Like last time when they were 15 minutes late, and I didn't say anything, I'm still holding that grudge. Or I move into forgiveness with release. And forgiveness with release, it's like forgiveness with release is where you just say, I allow this to happen. This is not something that I'm going to take on personally. I assume the best about the person. I believe that this person means well, and I truly let it go. I've processed it, and I've actually decided to let it go. And it's so easy to move into forgiveness with resentment because we love to focus on the negative. But with a little bit of effort, we can actually see the better in the situation. We can think about, the bigger picture. We can think about why we actually, it's possible we don't know everything about what this person's motivations was. And then the final step is I move into determination. This is what Seligman talks about when he talks about positive psychology. So determination is when I decide what I'm going to do next. And then finally we move on and we take action. And it looks like we've lost our visual again. Sorry folks, we're having little technical issues up here. But we're going to get that on board for you in a minute. So here's the steps again. Current reality check-in, what actually happened, process, choose forgiveness with release, determination, what am I going to do about it, and then finally move on. So that's my steps for a one-time challenge. And a great quote from good old Helen Keller is, optimism is the faith that leads to achievement. Nothing can be done without hope and confidence. It's optimism that I'm talking about here. It's basically saying to myself, there's a bigger picture at play. I've got these 3 words that I live by, and this is a one-time challenge that I'm going to move through. So then we have system challenge. And I'm going to give you a little quiz at the end after we go through this, but I'm going to give you a system challenge. So what's a system challenge? It's a reoccurring challenge that I want to go away by improving the quality of my system. Okay, so let's look at how system challenges work. So, great. I think we have our visual back. So system challenges, again, current reality check-in and process quickly. And then what happens is I think long-term. So let me give you an example. We started to realize in our business a number of years ago that we were kind of sloppy. Well, actually, we were really sloppy around processing clients. And so I had sort of like this tourism mentality. And because I spent so many years in the tourism industry, what I mean by the tourism mentality is it's all feast and famine. It's high season, low season. And the high season is all about chaos. And so what happens when you have that kind of a mentality is you put up with a lot of chaos and mistakes and doing things off the back of a napkin. And that doesn't really work when you're trying to build a sustainable business that's not in the tourism industry. It doesn't really work in the tourism industry. And I realized that when we were processing clients, we were kind of sloppy. So as a system challenge, what I noticed was that we were missing things. We were doing things last minute. We were having to, ask for forgiveness when really we should have thought about things in advance. So small things like my audiovisual needs or my travel plans or letting clients know that I need to ship books to them. And so thinking long term, I realized I can't be thinking like the tourism industry. I need to be thinking more like a business, a non-tourism business, a professional business. And so what I did was I wrote down as if I was delegating. That's the next step for a system challenge. I wrote down as if I was delegating what would be all the steps I would explain to a subcontractor or an employee. Let's put it into a perspective for you. Let's suppose in your everyday business that you notice that there's something that is taking too long, sometimes you make mistakes which really frustrate you, which cost you time. What I would recommend, whether this is something like making sales calls, following up to inquiries, working on your website, writing a blog, writing proposals, responding to an RFP, going on a business trip. Write it up as if you're delegating it to somebody, even though you may not. But write it up as if you're delegating to somebody. And then what starts to happen is you'll start to see where the gaps are. So you sit back and you ask yourself, okay, if I was actually delegating this routine, this system to somebody, how would I describe every step? So as if they don't know anything, you see? Because when you do it to that level of detail, I can guarantee you, you will immediately see where there's areas to improve. So for example, for us, we created a simple checklist. And the checklist is divided into before, during, and after. Really simple concept. And so before I go on a speaking engagement, there's like 24 things that have to happen at least. And when I'm on the speaking engagement, there's about 12 things that have to happen. And when I'm after the speaking engagement, there's about 6 things that have to happen. And now every file has a checklist in front of it. So first of all, I wrote it up as if I was delegating it. Then I made a checklist. And now sometimes I complete the checklist. Sometimes Sarah in my office completes the checklist. Sometimes somebody else can complete the checklist. So the last step then is I practice and I refine and I reuse that system. So the idea is don't go back to ad hoc. Continue to work from a system. So we keep all of our systems in a tool called Evernote, which is very popular. It's a free tool online, and we call these standard operating procedures, or SOPs. And so each one of these SOPs is saving our bacon, because we now have 5 employees in the company, and each of those employees operate off of SOPs. And so it's a really effective way for me to actually get more things done. So again, sometimes I use the SOP to direct my work, and sometimes I can actually delegate the SOP out. Okay. All right, so just make sure you don't say SOB, because it really has a completely different connotation. Okay, let's move on to another juicy one, and that is the final of the 3 types of challenges, and that's a habit challenge. So here's the process I'm going to take you through. And this is, a lot of this learning comes from Charles Duhigg's excellent book called The Power of Habit, and many others that he refers to inside that book. But the first step is you got to ask yourself, what exactly is my routine, my habit that's not working? So for example, in 2014, I am sure, like myself, you experienced habits that were not very effective. So either you left things to the last minute, or you were sloppy with how you handled your money, or you were sloppy with the way that you managed your diet, your exercise, your relationships, your work, your sleep, whatever. So the first thing to ask yourself is, what exactly is this routine that I don't like? And what I mean by that is, what is it that I'm doing? Oh, I know. It's 9:30 at night. I know I should be packing it in and going to bed, but instead I go to Netflix, or I go and I turn on YouTube, or I do something, or I start eating. I'm doing something that is not effective. Okay, that's exactly my routine. The next step is, what is the reward that I'm getting? Now this is a little trick that Duhigg talks about in his book, The Power of Habit, that most of us are not aware of. He says the first thing you got to do is you got to identify what's the reward you're getting, because obviously this habit that's entrenched that you keep repeating that you don't like, they must be getting a reward. And until you identify that reward, that habit will continue. So why do I start eating at 9:30 at night even though I know I shouldn't? Well, it's because I am trying to stay awake. Okay, well so the unwanted behavior is eating late at night. The reward I get is it helps me to stay awake, but then I regret it in the morning. Okay, that's not good. Now I know the routine, eating after 9:30, the reward, trying to stay awake. So the next one is you design a new routine. I stop eating at 9 o'clock, which is in fact what I do. So I stop eating at 9 o'clock. Well now, how do I make that sticky? Of course I have to get creative and have a new reward. So for example, every time I exercise, I record, and I've been doing this for 10 years, every time I exercise, I record that in a calendar after I exercise. And that way I've been able to average over 10 years, or actually more than 10 years, an average of 1 hour a day, 30 days a week, 30 days a month, I mean. And so, and last year I averaged more than that every month. One month I had 45 hours in the month. And so why do I do it? Because that reward, writing it on the calendar, is enough to motivate me to go out and exercise even when I don't want to. So what's the next step is I build a practice, and I build what's called habit muscles. Habit muscles. Okay, quick question for you before we move on, real quick. In the Ask a Question box at the top, which one of these 3 challenges do you think you need to work on in 2015? Is it one-time challenges, system challenges, or habit challenges? So if you can just write in 1, 2, or 3. 1 is one-time challenge, 2 is system challenge, 3 is habit challenge. If you can just type that in, let's just see. So I'm getting 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, habit, 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 habit. Okay, I think I got my answer. It's like, okay, we should have just done a webinar on habits. I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry we didn't do a whole webinar on habits. But we will do another one on habits. Okay, so let me show you. Thanks for doing that, everyone. It looks like overwhelmingly it's 3. Okay, so here's a really cool thing I want to share with you about habits. Here's my simple little model. I want you to write this down, and that is this. Habits plus consistency equal willpower. So I want you to write down habit plus consistency equal willpower. Now, why is this so important? You see, I believe that most of us think of habits as a nice thing to do that makes me more efficient or makes me more effective. That's nice. So efficient is I get more done, same amount of time. Effective is I do the right stuff. Great. So I have a better habit around making sales calls. I do them in the first 90 minutes of the day. I have a better habit around clutter on my desk. I feel more efficient. I have a better habit around, before I leave the meeting, I take all my notes and I summarize them into Outlook or OneNote or Evernote or some kind of a system. That's a really neat habit. But what we forget about, or maybe we're not aware of, is when you attach consistency to that habit, it actually develops more willpower. So what is willpower? Willpower is my ability to do things even when I don't want to. You see, when we become more of a habit keeper, like most athletes are really good habit keepers. My youngest daughter, she's 17, plays on 4 different sports teams, and her athletic habits, I am convinced, are going to continue to make her a really outstanding student all around, because she knows how to get up and get herself to that practice. She knows how to perform at a game. She knows how to take care of her body after the game. She knows how to get enough sleep. So because she's developed really consistent habits in the world of athleticism, I believe she has a lot more willpower than most people in the world of saying no to drinking, drugs, whatever you want to think about that kids can get themselves into. She has more willpower to say yes or no even when she doesn't want to. So this is a really cool part of habits that I want you to start thinking about in 2015. Every time I successfully use that habit, I'm actually developing habit muscles or willpower. Okay, here's a great quote from Anne Lamott, someone I'd love to meet someday. She's a Northern California writer. My favorite book from Anne Lamott is Bird by Bird. And she says, it's good to do uncomfortable things. It's weight training for life. I love that. Every time I use that habit, that maybe it's uncomfortable, like going to bed early or eating the right kind of food or saying no at the buffet line or saying no to dessert or going out when it's rainy and cold and minus 30 and getting some exercise, it's weight training for life. That's an awesome concept. So now I want to add one other element, and that is this idea of tracking. So if I've developed these excellent habits for 2015, I know I need to use them consistently to build more willpower. There's another aspect which is really powerful called tracking. And what tracking means, tracking is me recording my successes. Now, how does this actually work? Well, first a little story. 17 years ago, I was doing tons of training that involved driving, and I was doing a lot of self-employment training. That's actually how I got into this business. Was I was fresh out of graduate school, and I was asked to start teaching people marketing because I had just created this crazy company in Antarctica, which was making millions of dollars, and I had done it all through marketing. And I was drinking a lot of coffee, but I wasn't really aware that the coffee was a really big issue until I started to track it. I went to a financial planner. He said, you need to write down everything you spend your money on. I did it for 2 weeks. Lo and behold, coffee was what came up. And so by tracking my coffee habit was enough of an inspiration. Actually, I was so sickened by how much I was spending on coffee. Like I'm talking, to the equivalent of about 2 weeks of income was spent on coffee to pay for my coffee habit for the year, that I quit drinking coffee 17 years ago. And I actually used that money to invest in the stock market, and which allowed me to go on and buy our first house. But the idea is that tracking is really powerful. In her book, The Willpower Instinct by Kelly McGonigal, she says that what you want to do if you want to build more willpower is you want to strengthen the I won't power, the I will power, and the strengthen self-monitoring. Self-monitoring is tracking. So let's go through this. The I won't power, that's my ability to have a habit of saying no. my willpower, that's a habit of saying yes to things. So no to the buffet line, no to staying up late. I will get on the phone first thing in the morning, and I will ignore my email, and I will actually make those calls. And then self-monitoring is tracking. And what McGonigal is saying is if you put these three together, you have the willpower instinct. So what is self-monitoring? Self-monitoring is where I actually pay attention to the habits and my success. And what happens then is I actually build even more willpower. So success begets success. So here's a really simple, first of all, I'll give you some crazy examples of how this has worked. In one study, people who had a weight problem were simply asked to write down everything that they ate. So just like I did with my coffee. They weren't asked to eat less, eat better, or eat less frequently. They were asked to simply write down what did they eat. And lo and behold, over a 2-week period, that group compared to the control group ate better, ate less, slept more, drank less alcohol, and smoked less if they were smokers. Well, that's insane. They weren't asked to do any of those things. Well, how did that happen? Success begets success. Because they were monitoring what they were eating, they were more conscious. They were developing their self-monitoring muscles, as McGonigal said. So because they were recording what they ate, they became more aware of what they were eating. They became more aware of all of their habits. And lo and behold, they've got better at all of their habits. Because, why? Because they had more willpower. And the same thing applies to people that were simply asked to record their exercise or anything like this. If you're asked to record something over a period of time, you become more aware of what you're doing well, what you're not doing well, and you naturally start to actually get better of it. The opposite is also true. The opposite is kind of the sloppy approach to habits. Well, I kind of did it here and I did there, and I went to the gym recently, and yeah, I usually eat pretty well, and yeah, I don't eat too much of this, and yeah, I get my sales calls done. It's kind of a sloppy way of doing it. So tracking is where I actually pay attention and I record what I actually did. So here's the exercise for you. All you need to do is for 2 weeks is pick one habit that you want to improve and record your success. That's all you have to do. So let's say, for example, you do want to go to bed earlier. Or let's say, for example, you want to have a morning routine that I wrote about last year in my book called The Morning Club. So you want to have a morning routine. Great. So, or you want to be more effective making sales calls, or you want to spend less money. Great. So pick the habit. Then for 2 weeks, record your success. I don't care if it's a journal or it's Evernote or OneNote or Outlook or a piece of paper, but you record your success. Just make a little box for 2 weeks, like 14 days, 14 little boxes, and then record what happened every day. And I can guarantee you, because you're spending more time focusing on it, you'll actually get better at it. And if you get better at that one area, then of course you're going to get better at other areas. Tony Hsieh, who is the now infamous founder of Zappos, which is the online shoe sales company that Amazon bought, I think 2 years ago for $1 billion. He says, without conscious and deliberate effort, inertia always wins. I love that quote. Without conscious and deliberate effort, inertia always wins. When you get off this call, we'll have spent 60 minutes together. Hopefully, you have been reminded of some really solid principles around goal setting. Maybe you've learned something new around the idea of anchoring with 3 words. Maybe you've been reminded of, the fact that sometimes it's about systems and one-time challenges. Maybe you've learned something new about habits. But regardless, whether it was a reminder or something new, the idea is that you're going to be up against inertia. You're up against sort of like the human experience, if you want to put it that way. And I believe that the greatest success that we can have is when we decide, okay, what's the little change I'm going to make? Let's go and practice it on a frequent, consistent basis, and then let's pay attention to our results. Let's just simply pay attention, just like me, every day for 10 years, writing down every exercise that I made. It's the same thing as me writing down the success that I'm having with my online marketing, or writing down every week what is going on with my wealth, my actual financial wealth, or any of these things. the more I monitor them, the more I keep them top of mind, the more successful I am. I recently was talking to one of our clients, and a wonderful guy that we do some work for, and he asked me a question, and I asked him, well, where is it that you came up with this information? Like, why are you asking this question? And this is for our SOS service, which is we have this really cool service for speakers called SOS, which is a social media reposting service. And he said, let me show you what I monitor. And he sent me an Excel chart which had, I bet, probably 18 columns of what he monitored every week. Now I can guarantee you, because he's monitoring all of these metrics for his online presence and success, that he will absolutely be more successful in growing his presence and success online because he's monitoring. Same thing with me quitting coffee, the same thing with me stopping all sorts of other habits like staying up late. I don't drink any alcohol. I got off gluten 2 years ago. Like, all of those things happen because I decided to pay attention to them. Okay, I want to wrap it up with one simple little technique, and then I'm going to let you get on your way. So this comes from a professor at Stanford named B.J. Fogg, F-O-G-G, and he calls it tiny wins. And I just love this idea, and I want to walk you through what he means by tiny wins. And I think it's a kind of a good summary for us today. So first of all, he says that if you want to have success in creating change in your life, you got to get very specific. And what I mean by that is, just as I've talked about today, you got to decide, is it a one-time change, a system change, and a habit change? Well, based on your feedback a few minutes ago, it's going to be a habit change, because overwhelmingly that's what everybody seemed to be really keen to go and change. Okay, great. So you got to get very specific though. What is it that I actually want to change? And what like for example, you say, all right, well, I really want to take better care of myself. Well, that's certainly not specific. What is the habit that's going to be a behavior that you can repeat? So get specific. The next thing is, you got to make it easy. So what he means by that is, you got to start with something small. So if you want to get into better physical shape or earn more money, well, don't start saying you're going to earn another, $5,000 this month or $10,000 this month or whatever. Just start small. Like, for example, if it's around fitness, just say, okay, I'm going to go out 3 times this week for 20 minutes, but I'm going to get my heart rate up. And the little clue for that, by the way, is I'll share with you, is you want to get your heart rate up to 60 to 65% of your maximum heart rate. And your maximum heart rate is 220 minus your age. So you can go do the math on that. So 220 minus your age, that's your maximum heart rate. And then from there, you want to go 60, 65%. So for me, that's going to be like 100 beats per minute. Okay, so figure that out, and you say, okay, I'm going to go 3 times this week for 20 minutes, which is the national minimum standard, which only 3% of all Americans, for example, actually hit. And that's where I'm going to start. And that's pretty easy. 3 times this week, 20 minutes at 60, 65% of my maximum heart rate. Great. Okay, and then the next step is to actually trigger that behavior. In other words, to have a way to make sure it happens. So I come home and I've got all my stuff laid out, my shoes, my jacket, my hat, my dog's ready to go or whatever, and I know that within 10 minutes I'm out the door and I'm gone again. I don't think about it. I don't get involved in anything else. I don't go on the email. I don't check my messages. I just know that that's my trigger, my behavior. When I arrive at my office, I see my stuff. I've already got a plan. I sit down. I get a glass of water. I start making phone calls. That's my trigger to behavior. I want to go home. First thing I do is I wrap up my day. I update my day timer for the next day. I clear off my desk. I go home. Like today, I'm going to yoga. Well, the trigger for behavior is that it's on my calendar, and at 11:45 exactly, I step up, I walk out the door, and I'm gone. If I think about it, I'll be late and I'll miss it. And in the whole 2014, I only missed 1 yoga appointment. If I bring my mat to the office, I'm going to yoga, because at 11:45, I stand up. That's a trigger to behavior. Okay, so here's the question for you, my friends, is what is it that has gotten you really excited about doing from this webinar? So was it that you have a habit in mind that you want to work on? Good, tell me what that habit is. Was it that you're excited about getting your anchor 3 words together? Tell me that that's it. So just say anchoring words. Was it that you've gotten some ideas around how to make your habits more consistent? What is it that you are excited about working on from this webinar? I'll give you a couple of minutes. You can go up to the Ask a Question box and type that in, and then we will wrap up this call today. So I've got responses coming in like crazy. So I've got anchor words from Carol. Thanks for that. Carol, by the way, if you put 3 exclamation marks after it, that means you have to tell me your words, because that's like the clue for me. So that means you have to email me your words. Nasip says, spend less time on social time. Nice one. I really encourage you to be really specific about that one. Adele says, make habits consistent. Michelle says, all of the above. Sharon says, triggers. Susan says, habit, not following through. Pernell says, habit, to not let anything stop me from making my 15 calls a day. Okay, so here's a little thing, Pernell. So go get yourself a little treat, like, jelly beans or whatever, right? And just, you get to move one over into another jar. Just do something really fun for a week, just to kind of play with it, so you've got that actual 15 calls done. Lowry says, tiny wins. Good one. Audrey says, habit and consistent. Steve says, working on system challenges. Good one. Dana says, habit, get more sleep, and anchor words. That will totally pay off. Keith says, it's doable. Habits can change. Absolutely, man. Like, I'm 56, and I'm jazzed about changing my habits. Terry says, tracking. Very good idea. Peter Drucker would be proud. I don't take that as a compliment. Andrew says, more consistent reinforcing habits. Audra says, anchor words for the year. Marie says, anchor words and habit. Pat says, recording your successes is motivation to change tiny wins. Yeah, Pat, here's what I do, is I just go get myself a cheap calendar. All the stationery stores are full of half-price calendars. Go get yourself a nice cheap calendar that's the right size and have it available at home or at work. And that's what you can record in. It's the easiest thing. Just clip a little Sharpie pen to it and you're off and running. Fiji says, tiny wins, breaking down my goals and building on them slowly. Nice. Marion says, excellent ideas on how to succeed in my long-term goal and make it happen. Nice. And Justin says, differentiate challenges. So awesome. So look, here's the deal, everyone. Me yakking on about this stuff is great, and I really appreciate you being on the call. I really appreciate you being there for the whole time. But the reality is it all happens after we get off the call. You know this. And so the reality is it's now all about making this sticky. And that's why I wanted to finish with this idea of tiny wins. I do not want you to get off the call and say, well, okay, Culver's got me thinking I need to start all over again. That's not the point. You're already successful. The only reason you're on this call is because you're successful. People that create success in their life, they get on calls like this. People that don't even know what success means never get on calls like this. So I know you're already successful. The question is, what's going to be your tiny win? And here's the question I'm going to leave you with, and that is, again, if we were meeting 11 months from now and you told me you'd had the best year ever, then what is it you must have been doing every day to make that absolutely happen? Because it is totally happen. It can totally happen. And I know because one of my first words is abundance. So I want to leave you with this quick little idea. Every day you have a chance to start absolutely from scratch. In accounting, they call it zero-based planning. This idea of rather than taking last year and then going up by a certain percentage and adjusting, they start from scratch. They rethink it. It's a really refreshing way to clear the slate and decide what you want your life to look like. And I think all too often we wait. We say, yeah, but. We think, well, when I'm a little older, when I'm a little wiser, as soon as I get through my doctorate, as soon as I get through the kids, as soon as I retire. And it's a huge mistake because usually that but is keeping us from enjoying what's already in front of us. And I personally am totally intent on having an abundant year where I treat it like a game, where I want to win as much as possible, but also I enjoy juicy moments, like I enjoy spontaneity, and I enjoy being goofy, and I enjoy having fun, and I enjoy taking risks. So my wish for you is that you do create the best year ever, and you do it by being smart about it, by not waiting for something to happen, by actually starting every day like a clean slate, and every day just deciding for yourself, how am I going to make this the best day ever, the best week ever, and then the best year ever. Listen, thanks very much for being on this call. I really appreciate it. I know an hour of your time is absolutely a gift that you've given me, and I just want to tell you that I really I really value you, and I really appreciate the fact that you trust me enough with an hour of your time. And I want you also to do something for me. So if you want to get a copy of these notes, I am more than happy to put that together for you. Just email me at hugh@hughculver.com right away. And just in the subject line, just say notes please. Also, I'd really appreciate it if you enjoyed this webinar, if you could type something in there that you would be willing to let me use to promote these webinars in the future. So if you enjoyed something from the webinar or you enjoy my style, if you can just write something in the email, I would really appreciate it. Okay, my friends, until we talk next time, one quick thing before we go, and that is that on the 29th of this month, Jane Atkinson and I are going to be doing, at exactly the same time, we're going to be doing our webinar to announce our new the Business of Speaking School, which is starting in March. So on January the 29th, watch for this invitation. Jane and I will be doing a really cool webinar where we are going to share best practices for building a profitable speaking business. So whether you're a speaker, consultant, author, you are or anyone that has expertise, consultant, I think you're going to want to be on this call. So that's going to be coming up January 29th. So watch for that invitation. Okay, my friends, make it a great day. Thanks for being on the call. I really appreciate you. Take care.